On today's crossover episode of Locked on Wild and Locked on Sabres, do both teams need a little bit of a different look in their captaincy?
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a special crossover edition of Locked on Wild and Locked on Sabres. We are your team every day, and we thank you for making both Locked on Sabres and Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure, if you haven't already, that you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite audio platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked on Wild and Locked on Sabres is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Folks, I'll admit it, I do have a competitive side, and it's a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. On today's crossover episode, we are going to talk about leadership as Joe DiBiase of Locked on Sabres joins us today to take a look at both teams kind of needing maybe a little bit of a new voice. We'll talk about Lindy Ruff returning to the Sabres as well, and two cities that definitely could use some non-playoff heartbreak. We'll talk about that here today as well. First off, Joe, glad to have you on the show. Being an Eastern Conference team, we don't get a chance to do these crossovers that much, but we got a good topic, I think, for today's show.
I'm glad to talk with you. It's amazing that we haven't talked more recently because the Sabres and Wild have made like 1 billion trades together in the last 10 years, but it's been a minute, I think. No, not even that long. What, last year, Jordan Greenway would have been the last one?
Yeah. Yeah, and we're going to hopefully see the Wild will hopefully reap the benefits of that here soon. Riley Heidt just destroying the WHL. Mm-hmm. And so that's the hope on our end, is that we'll get a chance to see the return here before too long. How is Jordan Greenway doing, by the way? Like, just honestly, didn't get a chance to take a look at what he did this season a ton, but I know in the last check-in I did, he was getting some top 6 time.
He was, which, not my favorite idea in the world. I think you're probably not in the best position when he's playing top 6 minutes. There were definitely moments in the season where they were trying to tie a game late with under a minute to go. And, Tage Thompson's on the ice, which makes sense. Dylan Cousins makes sense. Alex Tuck, of course. Darlene. Oh, what's Jordan Greenway doing out there? 1 minute to go. Not my favorite. He's not a bad player. I don't mind him at all being in their bottom 6. He's a big physical player that they do not have a lot of. I'd actually almost like them to get another one for their bottom 6, but I feel like this team will be at its best when he is not being asked to play 18, 19, 20 minutes a night.
Yeah, that's exactly where the Wild were at when they made the decision to trade him. But, it was just one of those classic scenarios where you're just looking for a guy to maybe do a little better in a change of scenery, and the Wild just wanted to move on. Let's talk a little bit about Lindy Ruff here to start, because middle segment will be all about just looking at kind of the concept of leadership, because I have some thoughts as to what makes an effective captain, an effective leader for a team, and I think you have similar thoughts as well. So just talk to me about the Lindy Ruff returning to the franchise. Don Granato obviously let go at the end of the year, and the Sabres moved quickly. They struck. This was a direction they wanted to go in, bringing Lindy Ruff back, and had a chance to listen to your episode breaking it all down. It seems like a move that is going to get one reaction nationally and a different reaction internally.
I would say that's definitely the case, that they make this hire knowing, I'm sure, what the reaction will be. There'll be a bit of an eye roll, I think, across the entire hockey world as they make this hire. But what they're looking for, we'll talk a lot about leadership today. They're looking for more accountability. That is the buzzword of the last 14 days around here. Kevyn Adams spoke extensively about the type of coach he wanted last Tuesday in his end of season press conference, the same day that he fired head coach Don Granato. And I don't even know that Granato didn't try to be that type of coach. I just think when you're in your 4th season as a coach and you've been one type of way before, which was very player friendly, came up with a lot of these guys in their youth teams. He had history with them and had allowed them kind of, hey, make your mistakes. We're going to develop you. You're going to growing pains. When you then get to expectations and pressure, and now you try to be a different type of coach, I just didn't know that really hit the way that it should have for players. Versus Lindy, who comes in, he has a pedigree. He's not won a cup, and they could have done better for pedigree specifically. Berube was out there and won a cup, but Lindy is 5th all-time in wins. He's been around the block. He has made the playoffs with all 3 franchises that he's been with. And it's not like it's been 10 years since he had a team. 1 year ago, he coached the team to 3rd place in the NHL and the 2nd round, which some franchises will go, well, that's nothing. You know, you want cup expectations. This city's in a 13-year playoff drought. 2nd round of the playoffs sounds like Christmas morning. So Lindy comes in with the type of expectations and I think the type of mindset, the type of style that this team definitely needed. Sure, the nostalgia is there, but I do think that if I took the name away and said, I'm not even going to tell you who it is. The Sabres are going to bring in the coach that's 5th all-time in wins, is a veteran presence, and had the 3rd best team in the league 1 year ago. As a team that's as dysfunctional as the Sabres are right now, I think it would have been hard to see them doing a lot better than that.
Yeah, and look, as somebody that covers a team that has made the playoffs, I think it's 10 out of the last 12 years.
They've made it 10 times since the Sabres have last. It's incredible.
Having not advanced past round 1, like it's
sure.
There are different tiers to this. Like, obviously, for not having been there, the Sabres are looking to climb the mountain of getting back in. That's the mountain they're looking to climb. And I'm in a similar spot with the Wild. It's like they get in, but then it's losing in the first round every year. It's getting beat when you have a 2-1 lead in these series and just losing in the same ways. So like it's funny how parallel these situations are at, because you look at Dean Evason at the beginning of the year. He definitely was a player's guy. The team loved him, but they just it was just a hideous start to the season. 5-14. You can't survive that as a coach. And so, John Hines comes in. He's viewed as more of kind of a tough love guy, hold players accountable. We've seen a little bit of that since he took over, but it's fascinating the more we dive into it, just how many layers are similar between these two teams.
It kind of just, both teams maybe feel like, both fan bases just kind of feel like you're stuck. I mean, it's a different level of stuck, right? The Sabres are stuck on, you can't even get to the playoffs in a league where half the teams make it and there's more parity than any other sport. It's almost incredible that they haven't been able to. The Wild, right, like I mentioned that they've made the playoffs 10 times since the Sabres have last, but you've only won 2 playoff series in that span. So, right, it's just at a different level, but it's the same feeling of just we're hitting our heads on a ceiling, and what are we going to do to overcome that? Again, I think the Wild, it's a little bit harder to make the jump that they're doing. The Sabres, it's incredible that they haven't made the jump that I'm talking about.
Right. Yeah, and with what the Wild are operating with, they certainly have found the way to get to the postseason with those constraints. But, in my honest assertion, it's a roster that I think just kind of has gotten comfortable. Like everybody's locked in. There's no threat of anybody being moved off the roster at this point. Okay. And so you get kind of complacent, and 2-1 series leads the last 2 playoff series the Wild have been in, and they lost both series. Like that just is something that should not happen. But that's this group. That's why the fans feel stuck, is because it's this group. It's become kind of the trademark of this group, is that when the going gets tough, the other team does what they need to do, and they get the wins, they get the series wins, and the Wild are the team that ends up going home.
Sure. Well, I guess you just kind of answered it. I walked into this conversation thinking like, okay, Minnesota, are they going to be looking to blow it up at all? Because when I look at their top 10 in the league in average age, and you didn't meet expectations, like what, and when you have been stuck as long as you've been, like what's a natural follow-up to that is, okay, is it time to kind of start over? But you're right, now I've got their cap friendly page open. Like, where do you pick apart the team and say, let's start it over? I mean, Kaprizov's the one that's not locked in super long term, but you don't want to do that. That's I think you would agree with me, by far your best player.
Yeah, you really can't afford to do the large scale sort of teardown that probably is necessary to just get the age off this roster. It's amazing the combination that they are one of the oldest teams in the NHL. They're also one of the smallest. Like, they have just kind of shrunk into this corner over the last couple of seasons. But if you do that, Kirill's going to leave. Kirill's going to be somebody you have to try to look at trading then. And that's just the last thing that anybody on this franchise should be looking at this point.
Well, I guess, you can make moves, right? Like, we dealt with this with Jack Eichel. Jack Eichel had a no movement clause and he had leverage and he could pick and choose, to some degree where he wanted to go. Kirill's got a no movement clause that kicks in on July 1st. So I don't know if you tend to think they have a decision to make, because again, you can't, if you decide a year from now, okay, he doesn't want to sign with us long term, do we really want to go into a lame duck year and not trade him and lose him for nothing? And then you get into that old song and dance. You could get ahead of it by doing it now, but again, that's the type of organizational decision that reaches like the ownership level, I think, let alone the GM.
Yeah, and I don't think Craig Leopold, the owner, I don't think he's going to even entertain that. So you're back to this. You circle back to, like, we have to do everything we can to show Kirill that we're making steps to try to get this situation, try to get this team in the right direction. And for me, Joe, that circles back to, like, I think you just got to get somebody somehow into this organization that is just not going to tolerate anything less than, like, hey, if you're not contributing to this team in a positive way, and we'll talk more about it here after the break, but it just feels like this team needs to find somebody else that can come in and just eliminate some of the, like, there's so many games this year where players just were kind of there. Like, you just got to get somebody to come in and kind of wash that away. So we'll talk more about that, because, does it mean somebody who is more of a vocal leader? Does it mean somebody who is a leader behind the scenes? There are different ways that leadership can show itself. And so we'll dive into, like, what do you want? What do you want in a captain? What do you want the captain of your team to be doing to help move the franchise forward? We'll talk about that as we continue today's crossover episode of Locked on Wild and Locked on Sabres after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild and Locked on Sabres is brought to you by Monopoly Go. We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime. It's the second intermission. It's the bottom of the seventh inning, and the scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure you or your team can pull out a win, but then you dig deep. Lift your head up, say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime, with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. And folks, I went down the Monopoly Go rabbit hole myself. I'm addicted. And it's just a fun part of the day to just get some of that nostalgia from the old Monopoly days, whether it be at the Thanksgiving table or Christmas, playing Monopoly with your friends, with the family, trying to be the one that gets Boardwalk and Park Place. You can do all of that. You can get all of that kid nostalgia with Monopoly Go. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go. Now free on the App Store or Google Play. Welcome back to today's crossover episode of Locked on Wild and Locked on Sabres. Once again, we are your team every day. And Joe, the NFL draft is officially here. We now get to figure out which quarterback the Minnesota Vikings are going to stick their future to. I can't wait. And if you're looking for a little bit more NFL draft coverage, make sure to check out the Locked On NFL mock draft. You can get a full dose of what players Locked On NFL experts think will go at particular spots, to which franchises, even the fantasy football angle. It's all on the Locked On NFL mock draft, available on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Joe, the whole reason that I wanted to do this crossover is because I listened to one of your episodes after the season was finished, and you got into the leadership topic because, and I'm right with you on this. I look at Jared Spurgeon, who is a very good player. Like, let me not mince words here. Jared Spurgeon's a very good player. He is not a vocal captain. He is somebody who is very welcoming to new players, obviously. But I kind of feel like I look across the league, look at a guy like Brady Tkachuk, very vocal. He's going to throw everything he has out there on the ice. And obviously he's built differently than a player like Spurgeon is. But I don't know. I kind of gravitate towards guys that are demonstrative and vocal and just are going to throw everything that they have out there on the ice. If you beat them, that's one thing. But you're never going to kind of question like, seemed like the team seemed like they maybe had a little bit more they could have given in that particular game.
Yeah. I am thinking a lot about this recently. It's not usually something I really key in on either. I think sometimes it's over talked about in hockey, but I do think there are situations where it definitely matters. It's funny, you describing Spurgeon reminds me of conversations we used to have about Jason Pominville when he was the Sabres captain. Like, just not vocal at all. Great player, great dude. Everyone on the team loves him, but, are you built for the C? Because sometimes great leaders even just aren't built for wearing the letter. I think that, especially where the Sabres are at right now, I've thought about this a lot recently of what you really need out of the leader of a team. And I just think finding a way to set a standard, a championship standard, is maybe even rare, but you gotta have it where the player is also going to hold up that standard on the ice. I think one trap that the Sabres have fallen into in the last 10 years, I would say really all the way back to Chris Drury, which is a long time ago now, is you can have someone that is a professional and sets the standard off the ice, like a Kyle Okposo, or like back in the day, a Craig Rivet, or I think he didn't wear the C, but Josh Georges was this for the Sabres for a while. Those guys, Brian Giunta is another one at the end of his career, where totally respected, totally believed they were doing everything the right way off the ice to be a leader, but then they'd go out there and they wouldn't carry their own weight, playing 10 minutes a night on the ice, not the player that you're counting on night in and night out. And how easy is it to follow a guy like that when he's sitting on the bench in the most critical moments? You got to hold up your own end on the ice. And the Sabres have had other captains where Pominville, I guess, like, I wouldn't want to put all this on him, but again, just not the typical guy I think of for this. Eichel is someone that absolutely held up his end of the bargain on the ice, but probably too young and immature to wear the C when they gave it to him. So they've kind of had it both ways. What I really want the Sabres to get to a place, I think of McKinnon for this. McKinnon, to me, hearing some of the stories about how that dude is off the ice with his training regimen and how he might be even over the top for some of this stuff, where he'll like get into it with teammates if he sees them eating something that they're not supposed to on an off day. Like, McKinnon is maybe a psycho for this type of stuff, but I want even 80% of that. I want a guy that is one of the best players out there when he's on the ice, and off the ice, he is setting the standard day in and day out. I think the Sabres have been missing both of those elements in a leader for a long time. I'm hoping Rasmus Dahlin can be that. But again, it's not so common that you find a guy like that.
Yeah, we've got little glimpses of it here with Brock Faber, who had just a monster rookie year for the Wild this year. Answered questions after every game. He threw his body out there. We found out he was playing with broken ribs for 2 months. And he's playing 25, 28 minutes a night. And it's an easy kind of fill in the dots for Wild fans to say that's what we want. That's what because Faber too, he's not going to play in the World Championships because he wants to just get better. Like, he wants to spend the entire offseason focused on him and doing what he needs to do to get better. And it's like, that's what you should be following. And this season for the Wild, they had, I think, 3 closed door meetings at various points throughout the year. And I feel like stuff like that, I feel like a closed door meeting should almost be like the point of no return for a team. Like, you have it once to really air out what's going wrong with your season.
Yep.
If you end up having to do that multiple times, it just completely loses the point of why it's being done. And not only that, Bill Guerin had a closed door with the team. I think Dean Evison had one before he was let go.
Yep.
It feels like a group, a leadership group that by and large for this team is kind of just gotten to the point where they're okay with making the playoffs. But beyond that, there just isn't a lot being done to, lay it on the line.
Right. Raising the standard, if you will, too.
Raising the standard is a fantastic way to put it.
Yeah. It's funny, too, because they've got, well, I guess, who on that roster grows into that? I mean, you mentioned Brock Faber. He's young enough to where I would absolutely hope, if I'm a Wild fan, that he's going to be that guy. Yep. Boldy, I know, is still very young, so maybe he grows into something like that also. But the other guys that are near the top of your lineup, I'm imagining, are closer to aging out than taking over the culture of the roster of the team.
Yeah, that's the thing too, is with some of those guys like Matt Zuccarello is a good example. He is, he's 38, I think he is, getting to the end of his career, and so to throw that on him at this point, it's almost kind of an honorary thing. If you're going to make a change,
right?
Honestly, if it were me, give it to Fleury for a year. Like, if you're going to just make kind of a transition and you don't feel necessarily like Faber's ready for it,
sure,
but you want to just go that route for one of those old guys. But what you really
want to be is the team that goes and saves Brady Tkachuk from Ottawa. That's what I think you really want to be. That's a monster trade, but I want to make that trade too. Sabres are in their division, so I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. But if that dude asks for a trade at any point, like, that's the ball game I think you want to be in.
Yeah, 100%. And I know it's a long shot to happen, but I got that in my head and I can't get it out now. Sure. Is if Brady Tkachuk is not 100% thrilled with what Ottawa's doing, I make the call the next day.
Well, because this exact thing, and I by the way do believe that we're headed in that direction. I don't know that it'll be this offseason, but we dealt with this in Buffalo. Like, Eichel was only going to give you so much of his career before he was going to say, dude, I can't spend my whole career doing this. Tkachuk will be going into year 7 next year, having never made the playoffs. And again, I'm not predicting he'll do it this offseason, but he's not staying there forever. Eventually that happens. And if they don't make it, and his brother, like, this happened with his brother. Yeah. He got traded out of Calgary. The Florida Panthers I still am so impressed by the Stones of this trade. They traded their all-time leading scorer on the heels of a 100-plus point season. They traded a guy who was on their top pair for Matthew Tkachuk, who is a great player, but that guy came in and changed all the standards immediately. And that move is, I think, the biggest reason why they've had the last 2 years that they've had. So that is why it's the same last name, right? It's a similar type of personality. It's a similar level of player. Man, whoever trades for Brady Tkachuk, if that guy gets traded, like, I would almost expect it's going to go similarly to how it went for Florida.
Yeah, and I'm just going to throw it out there again. The Wild need to be keeping an eye on that. It's going to be a heavy price, but that's the kind of thing. That's the kind of thing you have to pay to get somebody that can do that. And Tkachuk he's a physical player. He can also score. I think he had 30 goals plus this season. Again, he's like a 70-point guy.
Yep.
That's a rare breed. So I don't know. Maybe we'll look back in a year and I'll be talking about how the Wild did what they needed to do to bring a guy in. But Joe, let's finish today just having a little fun because obviously up in Buffalo, similar levels of postseason heartbreak to us down here. And so let's commiserate together to finish today's crossover episode of Locked On Wild and Locked On Sabres after this. Today's crossover episode of Locked On Wild and Locked On Sabres is brought to you by Indeed. When you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could handpick the best stars for your business team too? If you're building your talent roster, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. You can find top talent with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like matching, assessments, and virtual interviews. Join over 3 million businesses worldwide using Indeed to hire great talent fast. Indeed knows when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/locked-on to start hiring now. That's Indeed.com/locked-on. Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Final segment of today's crossover episode of Locked On Wild and Locked On Sabres. And we thank you for making both shows your first listen each and every day. Seth Topol joined by Joe DiBiase. Joe, it is an experience to be a Buffalo sports fan, just like a Minnesota sports fan, because I see this further played out with the Minnesota Timberwolves having a 2-0 series lead against the Phoenix Suns. Did you know the Minnesota Wild have never done that in their history?
They've never been up 2-0 in a series?
They have not. I found that out. I found that out today, and I had to willfully pull myself out from underneath my desk at work because, man, that's I was not expecting that.
There's no deep playoff runs, right? Second round is the furthest I think in my lifetime can remember. I mean, they did it early in their history, right? Where they went past that, but I'm too young for that, I think.
Yeah, that was the one that it was, I believe it was 02-03.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Where the Wild got to the Western Conference Finals, but then
that's like an 8 seed? It's like an 8 seed, maybe? Yeah.
They got in late in the season and they rode all the way. But in those series, like in the series against Colorado, they were trailing 2-0. They were, I think, tied 1-1 with Vancouver in the second. And actually, if I remember correctly, they were trailing in that series too, and they just won out. So beyond that, it doesn't matter if they're one of the top seeds in the postseason like they were in 2016, 2017, just ran away with things and then swept by their former coach as the 8 seed St. Louis Blues. Like, it doesn't matter when. It doesn't matter if they're the low seed or the top seed. Just seems like Minnesota sports always find a way to make us say, here we go again.
Yep. Well, it's been a long time for the Sabres when it comes to playoff heartbreak. Obviously, I was in high school the last time that happened. I'm now married with a house. So it's very different phases of life since their last heartbreak. But for that, it definitely goes back to post-lockout where everyone here, even to this day, feels like they should have won the Stanley Cup. They are up against the Hurricanes in that series in the conference finals. It just felt like the total team of destiny. And 5 of their top 7 defensemen get hurt before a game 7 that they lose by 2 in Carolina. That felt like their cup. And now they're being run by a guy that was on that Hurricanes team, by the way, in Kevin Adams, which is always a little bit of salt in the wound. But it's all right. He's from here. The Bills is where the heartbreak is.
Yeah.
Recently. The Bills that is every single year in the last couple of seasons. And it does not help when it is ending to the same exact team every single year, 3 times to the Chiefs. I would almost argue this is a weird dynamic, Seth, where 3 years in a row, not only have they beat the Chiefs, but they've beaten the Chiefs in their own building in the regular season. It's every year like teasing us like, we know you could do it. You're showing us you could do it, and then you get to the playoffs and you don't do it. So there's this extra level of torture that the Chiefs have been incurring on the whole league that is absolutely happening, I think, here as much as anywhere.
Yeah, to spin that to the Vikings, I mean, I have horror stories of 2009, Brett Favre in the Superdome, 2014, Blair Walsh missing a 27-yard field goal against Seattle.
Yep.
We do get the Minneapolis Miracles every now and again.
Yeah.
And that was one that fueled me for the rest of the year. In terms of just sheer awesomeness, even though they got destroyed against the Eagles next week. It is amazing. Like, some franchises just go into the playoffs and there's an expectation of, all right, we're going to get to the Super Bowl, probably win it.
Yeah.
Maybe if we get stunned, it'll probably be in the NFC or AFC title game.
Mm-hmm.
What is it like to be those teams? Like, what is it like to have a franchise that you root for that just walks in every season with those expectations?
Yeah, it's different. It really, it was awesome. Like, the Bills, the last 5 years here, as they've been like a Super Bowl contender, you almost want to make sure that you appreciate it, because early on, it's super fun. Like, oh, this is new, and we got a quarterback finally, and we're winning games. And I don't even care they lost in the first round this year. Like, that was fun, and now let's go do it again. And then the next year, they will lose in the AFC Championship game. Same thing. Like, I'm not even mad. They made it to the AFC Championship game. That was great. Let's go do it again next year. And then you start to get to a place where, all right, nothing is good enough other than winning it all. And then because you have that expectation, because you have that standard for yourself as a fan, everything below it, you almost don't even enjoy it as much as you should. Yep. So that when, I don't know, they beat the doors off the Patriots in a regular season game, you know, maybe those ones we do enjoy more just because of what happened before the last 20 years. But you beat the Jets, you know, by 1 million, and like, you don't even fully appreciate it because, okay, cool, they beat the Jets. All right, what did the Chiefs do this week? Because I'm just consumed by what they're doing, because that is the only thing that matters, is do I beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs? You almost want to remind yourself, don't make it all about the end. Enjoy the journey as you get there, and then we'll have plenty of time to be mad for 8 months during the offseason. So that, I'm trying to remind myself that on a yearly basis, like, this team is awesome. They're good. Look how bad it could be with the hockey team. Enjoy the regular season. Enjoy when you beat up on a bad Steelers team in the playoffs, because otherwise you're just going to make yourself miserable, just consuming yourself with what's going to happen at the end.
Yeah, and it's all about, this is a great callback to earlier in the episode and a perfect way to kind of tie things together. It's all about raising that standard. If you raise the standard, you raise the expectations, and then you get to the point where those wins in the regular season against Chicago and San Jose can just feel like, yeah, we were supposed to do this. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because both of these cities are going to be linked until one team or the other wins it. And then it's just the other team. Okay, now you guys are the ones that haven't won a title yet for however long. I can't even count the years, because it's too depressing at this point.
Yeah,
but
it's not. It can be fun. Can be fun. You got to find your spots. But man, I'm just praying the Sabres get back to a point where we can be mad about what they do in the playoffs, or mad about anything. Man, it is again. I can't believe that it's been 13 years. It should not be possible in this league that is the case. They've done. It's impressive almost that they've been able to do this. And just to run this full circle, we talked about Lindy earlier. Like, fans are just begging for something to believe in. This hockey city, this is a hockey city. Like, it is more than a football city. When the Sabres are good, it's unlike almost any town, I think, in the country in that way, where they could take it over. But you got to give people a reason to want to buy in. And now, like, I'm getting, honestly, I don't think they'll ever leave. But I get spooked. I see what happened in Winnipeg this year, where the fans stopped coming. And that one's a little different because they were good and they stopped coming, which was almost weird. When Bettman's flying to Winnipeg and the CEO of the team's like, you guys better start showing up or we might have a problem down the road. I see that. I know that the business end, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't work right now either. And the longer it goes, you just allow yourself to have those dark type of feelings. And here it's simple. Winnipeg, I know they're getting hammered with, and there's economic reasons there for why that's happening. Here, it's just simple. Just give them a good team, and people will come back to the arena.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. Just give the fans a reason to cheer, and they'll cheer as loud as you can expect. So, appreciate the time today, Joe. For Locked On Wild listeners, if you want to keep track of the Sabres here throughout the offseason, make sure to follow Locked On Sabres. You can follow Joe at Sneaky Joe Sports on X. And for both listeners of both shows, both listeners of both shows sounds really bad. For listeners of both shows, make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes, keeping track of the Wild or the Sabres all off season long. You can find new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.